Yes.
Good morning and almost afternoon, everyone. We are here again from New Direction Family Law for another Family Law Uncorked segment. I am Jen Bordeaux, the Director of Public Relations, and I am joined again by the partners of the firm, Elizabeth Stevenson and Sarah Hink. And earlier this week, or may have been last week, I don't know, all the days run together now.
Together now.
Pretty sure it's Thursday, I don't know, Friday Eve. We were talking about child custody and how to approach that, and maybe some issues or tips for exchanges and following custody orders and everything that goes along with that. So during that discussion, child support came up a little bit. So we thought we would revisit the topic of child support and how today's climate and the financial constraints due to the skyrocketing unemployment rate and people filing for unemployment, still being financially responsible though for a lot of things to include child support. So we thought we would circle it back to child support and answer some of those questions. Of course, if while you're watching you have any questions related to child support, please feel free to shoot them over to us and we'll do our best to get them answered. But I'll go ahead and start with just talking about right now, if you have been laid off from your job, or if you file for unemployment and you're the one who's paying child support and now you don't have the ability to pay, are you still obligated? How does that work? Take it away.
Well, if you have a court order or an agreement, a separation agreement, that separation agreement and court order stays in place until somebody changes it or they agree otherwise or a court changes it. So just stopping paying doesn't change the order. You're still under an obligation to do that. And there are consequences if you just stop, no matter what the reason is.
That's correct. And, that's why it's important to assess what you can pay. So if all of a sudden you're laid off and you're seeking unemployment, but side note, you should seek unemployment because then you can show the judge if there is a future hearing that you were trying to mitigate the circumstances and show, do whatever you can to make those payments, even if you didn't have the ability. So file unemployment and pay what you can. Also important, we'll talk about is filing a motion to modify child support, because that will take it back to that day where you cannot make that payment. And even you might not be able to get into court for a while, and especially because the court closures and limited amount of cases they are taking, that's kind of like a marker in time that the judge can look back to.
Right, and my first advice to folks is, if you have lost your job or you're not having the same income, reach out to the other parent. And have a conversation about that, because you might be surprised that if you open the dialogue, it's a whole lot easier to work something out than if your payment is due on the 2nd of April and they haven't gotten it yet, then they're already mad. One, because they didn't get the money, and two, they really need it too, but you haven't even, at least make the effort to reach out, either if you don't feel like comfortable doing it between yourselves and you have attorneys, then reach out to the other attorney, and we can always try to work some sort of interim agreement out so that we can sort of avoid things and maybe sort of help each party out in some way. So my first advice is open the lines of communication about that.
Right, and that's what everyone's trying to do. They were talking about going to their landlords and seeking some kind of relief from the situation. And, there's online groups to crowdfund for restaurant workers. So this is a time where hopefully we can all sit down and, at least virtually on a phone call, talk about the circumstances and what you can expect to receive or pay as far as child support right now.
Right. And I will say, and I don't know how this changes during this time, but courts for the most part are very much, your child support obligation is one of the top of your obligations. It comes before a lot of other, it comes before your cable, it comes before your eating out and that sort of thing. And so I don't think that's going to change during this time. So make sure it's a priority for you too. And there are ways that you can budget or cut some things out of your budget that you can make at least some sort of payment for that.
Right. And the judges, they care about the dialogue that you had with the other party. They care whether or not you try to change things. If you just drop off the face of the earth and you aren't making payments, and then we get through this crisis and the other parent with custody, that is the one receiving the child support, ends up taking you to court for a show cause or something, and you were completely silent, the judge isn't going to like that. They're going to see some kind of action, some kind of effort on both sides to work through this right now.
Right. I agree with that. Exactly.
And just to circle back, you know, you guys have mentioned so far making sure you file for unemployment if you have lost your job, and opening the lines of communication with the other parent. And earlier this week, this week and last week, we've had a couple of Facebook Lives focusing specifically on those two topics. Just yesterday, we had one with an attorney who practices employment law, and he was discussing ins and outs of filing for unemployment, as well as the family psychologist that we met with last week to talk about tips for opening those lines of communication with the co-parent. So make sure you check those out for tips surrounding those issues as well. Let's say that you have filed for unemployment, that you have lost your job, and now you're seeking modification to child support to not have maybe as high of an obligation. I know you mentioned, you know, this is temporary, so still being able to, or trying to, you know, contribute something on some level, but with the way that the court is right now, is it an option to file for child support modification, or would you recommend that if the situation is right?
Yeah, you can definitely file for it. You're not going to get you won't get a court date for a while because the courts are only taking emergency matters at the moment. But the moment you file that motion, it quote unquote vests. It means that, let's say you get in front of a judge in September and they modify it, they can modify it back to the date you filed your motion. So the longer you wait, you know, you're not going to be able to recoup back to that date. So that's the reason to go ahead and file a motion to modify if you've lost your job or if you've been laid off or furloughed. And again, it shows the court that you're trying to do the right thing, that you're trying to get in front of a judge and ask their permission really to say, can I modify this, instead of, as Sarah said, just falling off the face of the earth.
Right. And you want to be able to file that motion, especially if you lost your job and you have a high child support obligation. So if you were making like $100,000 and the other person was making a lot less and you have a high child support obligation, it's very important that you file that modification. Right. You don't know when you're going to be able to find employment. I don't know what the numbers are going to be for jobs in all these different areas in the economy. So that's important to do. And you don't want to be on the hook for that high child support number by waiting to file 6 months later.
Right. And the court can't modify anything until you file. So even if you got laid off, but you were making $150,000, it's due when it's due. They can't go back and modify that. So that's another big reason if today you've lost your job, you need to file as soon as you can so that the court can go back and modify it, or you're going to be on the hook for months and months of child support that you are not able to pay and you weren't working at the time.
Yeah, so you'll still be ordered to pay those arrears in some form or fashion, whether that's a lump sum payment or adding it onto your new number. It's just be proactive. The court wants to see that during this time that you were at least job hunting, that you were applying for unemployment, that you were speaking to an attorney about what to do about this issue.
Right. And a lot of folks, I don't know, as a private attorney, but then there is child support enforcement, which is through the county, and the county attorney's office then represents you as an attorney. If you're going through child support enforcement, you need to do the same thing. Reach out.
Yeah, and you might just have to email them if you have a caseworker appointed to your case right now. I don't think that they're open and doing anything at this moment. So you're just going to have to call, email your contact.
Whatever you need to do. Exactly.
To show that you tried. Even if they don't respond to you, you can still print out that email later and say, hey, Judge, I was trying. This is what I was trying to do. Right. And figure it out from there.
Yeah, always having that written record for sure. If I've learned anything in working in law for the last several years, it is to always have that written record.
That's a paper trail, exactly.
And Elizabeth, I'm glad you brought this up, because as you guys are talking, it was a question that popped in my mind as far as the difference of having a private attorney for child support matter and child support enforcement. I know sometimes through consultations, you guys will recommend that someone starts with child support enforcement, just depending upon the individual situation.
Right, depending on their financial situation, but the rules and the law is exactly the same. It's just a matter of who represents you at that moment. Yeah.
Okay. Could you speak to any, I guess, the difference? Why would somebody maybe want to work with a private attorney as opposed to going through child support enforcement?
I think my main advice on that would be caseload, and certainly the county attorneys are good attorneys, but they have a high caseload. And so let's say that you're self-employed and we don't know how much you make. And so we'll send out subpoenas, we'll do whatever we need to do and take the hours we need to do it. But child support enforcement sometimes is constrained just because of the caseload and the time frame that they have. So it depends on, I think, one, how complicated the case is. If you're both W-2'd, I mean, it's simple, pretty much, here's your income, here's who pays for health insurance, here's how much the work-related child care is, and the guidelines then determine what your child support is going to be. So I think it really, talking with the private attorney can give you some idea how complicated or easy your case
and just, a lot of times with government programs, there's a lot of efficiency situations, right, with the caseload, whether or not they're going to pay for certain witnesses you might need, if you need to subpoena doctors for some reason or anything like that, and just having that get accomplished. A lot of times child support enforcement, it's harder to get a trial date. A lot of times they just expect you to get there, work out an agreement. So if you're in a situation where you know that your spouse or your co-parent is not going to come to an agreement with you and you're going to need to go to court, it's probably better to hire a private attorney if you can afford it.
Right. And part of that, if you in child support and custody and spousal support, you can ask for the other party to pay your attorney's fees for having to bring that action. But again, it's up to the judge. You're still going to be ultimately upfront responsible for that. But there could be times, and it happens, where the other party is ordered to pay your attorney's fees, either a lump sum or some partial payment or something like that. So you may get a payback or an offset at the end of the day in those instances.
Right. And for child support attorney's fees, they do look at whether or not the person was paying the child support prior to the hearing. So
that's right, and paying adequate child support, correct.
In good faith. We want to make sure everyone's operating in good faith. Not hiding income, not frustrating the process of finding out their income by not responding to subpoenas or instructing other people not to respond to subpoenas.
Right.
All that fun stuff.
Yeah. And you mentioned the guidelines, and just as a quick convenient resource, the link for the North Carolina Child Support Guidelines website is in the comment section here of the video. So you can look at the different worksheets and read about the North Carolina guidelines that way as well. So far we've been talking about if you are the person who is paying child support. So let's flip it around. Yeah, the obligor. If you are the person that is receiving child support and opposing party just stops paying, I'm sure, just given what you've already said, you would recommend, opening those lines of communication to see what's going on, because it could likely be due to loss of job or whatnot. But what other advice would you give or ramifications to the person that's supposed to be receiving this support getting? What do you have?
Well, like we said, open the dialogue. Why is this person not paying? Why is it because he or she is using this as an excuse to not pay? Like, oh, things are tight, but they're still working. Or did they lose their job? And how long is this going to last? Is it going to go on for the next few months? I mean, none of us really know what's going to happen in the next few months, but say we all get back out there and people are getting jobs again, restaurants are opening back up. Do they take that opportunity to have an income again and pay you? Are they paying anything? It's unfortunately a kind of wait and see moment for the people receiving the child support and figuring out what we can accomplish as far as negotiating maybe a new number and rehashing this once everyone is out of the circumstances. Or is this, we're going to file for a show cause in a few months? I don't think there's really a good point of filing it if they miss the first month at this time, but it's definitely a wait and see and just take a note of what is happening.
And a show cause, for those of you that don't know, is just a motion for contempt. So if you have an order and the other party doesn't do what the order says they should do, then the court can hold them in contempt. And the court has a lot of leeway about what they can do to quote unquote punish that person. And the first step is to order them to pay what they should have paid. But there's also, you might be going to jail. There's an option that you might go to jail too. I don't know if that would happen or not, but it is serious if you don't do what you're supposed to do under the terms of an order. So I would say if you're child support enforcement, reach out to the child case worker. If the person you're supposed to be paying has an attorney or you have an attorney, reach out to your attorney and explain the situation and get those attorneys together and see if they can work something out. I mean, that's where we are, because we could file a motion for contempt today, December probably, before we get in front of a judge. I don't know, but it's not. I know it's an emergency for the folks that are supposed to be getting it, because you got to pay rent and you've got to make your car payment and your mortgage and all of that. But you're not going to get immediate relief from the court, so you might as well do your darndest to try to work something out in the meantime.
Right, and it's always a benefit cost analysis with this. If they do miss that first payment, make sure your attorney explains to you the flip side of, ability to pay, and whether or not missing those child support payments was a willful or, justified act. If they lost their job, not receiving unemployment. I understand it's taking a really long time to process all those unemployment claims. So make sure you understand both sides before proceeding.
Right. And there's also the issue of the stimulus bill that was just signed and the family support that's coming. Mm-hmm. And Sarah, you and I were just talking about that it gets a little tricky sometimes if you're separated, or I think the party that claimed the child on their taxes for 18, if you've not filed 19, or 19 if you have filed, you're the one that's going to get that extra $500, at least in this first go round. And so talk a little bit, Sarah, about what if things have changed, or what if y'all were together, when you filed your taxes and now you're separated? Where's that $500 going to go? Because that's going to be a lot of money to a lot of folks.
Yeah, and basically what it looks like is it's going to go to the bank account. If you listed a bank account for either your direct deposit for your refund or to pay your taxes, that is the first place that the government will look to send that check. Okay. If you claim the child for 2018. If you were together, well, it's going to be whatever bank account was listed. Okay. If it's closed, like say a lot of times when people separate, they close the joint bank account, and I don't know what's going to happen then. Is it going to go back to the government that happened, and then they're going to issue a check at that point? I'm not sure. There might be times where you're going to lose out on some money and you might not receive that stimulus check just for logistic purposes.
Right. But I think that's another good reason to reach out to your attorney, because then they can help work out some sort of agreement that in the event the non-custodial parent does receive that money, then we were all on the same page that you're going to give that to the other party, as part of your child support obligation, or however you want to work that. So again, if everybody's up front and we've got the lines of communication open, there are all sorts of ways to try to sort of mitigate on both sides on how to help out and let everybody be able to sort of survive during this time, but make sure that we're doing the right thing.
Right, and that's for the benefit of the child, that $500 check. So it might be, okay, well, my ex can't pay child support for this month and next month. Well, then you get to keep the 500,
Right, exactly.
Or you can split it like pro rata, or just split it 50-50. There's all these different options, but it's worth talking about and finding a solution to.
I agree.
Another important thing about the stimulus bill is apparently if you are deficient on your child support payments and the state has reported it to the federal government, you're not going to receive your $1,200 check either. So that's something to look out for. If you were expecting to get the money, that's like one of the only things. You can owe back taxes and still receive the stimulus check. You can be deficient on your student loan obligation and still receive this check. The only thing that they're really looking at is making sure that you're up to date on your child support. But
that should be a lesson to everyone about how serious the courts and the federal government, the state legislature, and that sort of thing takes the child support obligation.
Yeah, and Elizabeth and I were talking about, well, is the person that is owed child support going to receive their $1,200 check? I don't see anything where it says that. That would be nice. I just don't think that the government right now can handle all of that and figuring out where that check should go. They're kind of taking the easiest path, and I understand there's so many people to get in this money in people's hands, and that would just require a lot of manpower, I think, on their part.
Right. Yeah, which they don't have at the moment. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, like what you said, as far as let this be a lesson to the seriousness of which child support should be taken, because I think maybe sometimes people kind of get lost if they're the one making the child support payment. that it's just another bill that they have to send out, when in reality, it is literally funds to help support your child or your children. So that's why it's taken so seriously. And so I just thought that was a great point, Elizabeth, bringing up how serious of an issue the government takes this.
Exactly.
In several different facets. So
exactly.
Definitely some good information surrounding child support. Anything else that either one of you would like to add before we wrap up?
I can't think. The only thing that we had talked about briefly was some folks have their child support wage withheld, which means it's just another deduction that comes out of your paycheck, sort of thing. So if you've lost your job, the other party then is not going to receive that payment. Again, give them a heads up, let them know. Other issue is if you're, let's say you're still employed, but your income has been reduced, the amount of money you receive via wage withholding would more than likely be reduced too, because they can only withhold a certain percentage of your income. So that's going to go down too. So again, don't let it be a surprise to the other party. If you don't want to talk to them, I get that completely. Shoot them a text, shoot them an email, or talk to your attorney and let them talk to the other one. So whether you're the person who's paying, the person who's receiving, no matter how you're getting it, the best thing you can do is talk to the other party, start an open communication, and see if we can work something out to at least get us through this time period.
Yep, great advice.
Definitely. All right. Well, thank you guys, excuse me, for joining me again from your homes and delivering some awesome, great advice as we continue to chart these or navigate these uncharted territories and see. So we will be back again tomorrow for, we've got one about emergency custody with Sarah again. And we'll also be talking about meditation and alternative ways to manage stress while you're at home, because we all know that those stress levels have increased with everything going on. So thanks again for joining me. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day. And viewers, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.